Are we ready? Yes. Woo! Let's do this. Thank you for being here.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to MENA, or Middle Eastern North African Representation in Arts and Entertainment. This is I don't know if a panel like this has ever been done before at LA Comic-Con or any other con, but I thought it was time to have kind of like this gathering, this conversation where we can talk about and highlight many creative MENA Americans working in film and television and other art forms today. This is also my first time moderating a panel, so bear with me. For those who don't know, my name is Paul Zachariah. My pronouns are he, him. I'm an actor, writer, and director based here in Los Angeles. Been here for almost 8 years now. I've worked in various positions behind the scenes, and I've been in front of the camera as an actor. I was on a web show called Mr. Student Body President, and I've done projects for 48-Hour Film Project, and I've written and directed a short film called Last Call, which has been in some festivals, won a couple of awards, and just currently working on my own projects right now. I'm a lover of Comic-Cons in general, and also I am representing Iraq, Egypt, and Palestine. So, like I said, we created this panel to, highlight MENA representation, and also not just on screen, but also behind the scenes in film, television, animation, illustration, writing, music, comedy, so many different art forms here. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We've got a great group of panelists here for you guys, and so I'm going to let them introduce themselves, starting with...
My name is Kristina Giblin. Again, thank you for being here. My maiden last name is Mikhail, so if you have seen works of like American Dad, or there was another game that I worked on called Batman the Brave and the Bold. It was for the Wii. I did animation, paint, and design for that. So I work in animation. I'm a painter most of the time, but I also do some design. I also happen to do some live action things here on set, like hair and makeup, especially special effects, and set decoration. So it's pretty cool. And I represent Coptic Egypt, specifically.
Hi, I'm Esraa. I'm an assistant director, and if you don't know what that is, we facilitate film, TV shows, all sorts of things, kind of like stagehands in theater. Stage managers. I'm representing Egypt. My pronouns are she, her, and I've worked on a lot of stuff. I've been around for a while. But some of the notable things I've done are I did Me Time. I'm on a feature film for Blumhouse right now, and yeah.
Hi, I am Yas Modares Ghasiri. My pronouns are he, him. I'm an actor, writer, producer, and singer. I'm representing Iran, Persian. And yeah, one of my more recent things, actually it was really cool. I got to do a voiceover for a Netflix film that's like a Spanish language film. So I got to play a bunch of trans guys in that one, which was really cool. Then I played a trans veteran in a film that was produced by Sylvester Stallone. It has Nate Boyer, the NFL player. It's about like the creation of this veterans organization. So I've done some stuff.
Hi, my name is Sarah Monand-Saïd. You might know me more as Samusai. I'm an author, illustrator, webtoon creator as well. When I'm not doing the art side of things, I'm also a family physician, so I wear 2 hats. And I mentioned this just so people can know that it's possible to, follow your passions and also maybe have another path in life. And there's many ways to get to do all the things that you love. So that's it. I'm here to humbly represent North Africa, or Algeria, and specifically Amazigh, Algeria.
Hello, I'm Kaveh Taherian. My pronouns are he, him. I'm representing Iran. That sounds like I'm in the Olympics. Absolutely. I am an illustrator and writer. I also have a background in film. I worked for about 10 years in production, also as an AD, unfortunately, sometimes.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, right, it's rough. I also worked as a producer and director, just pretty much whatever anyone needed. I've sort of transitioned over into illustration and writing work a little bit more. And actually, I believe Paul knows me from my podcasting work, where I co-host a podcast called Musical Splaining that you guys may or may not have heard. Oh my god, we have a fan. And yeah, is there anything else I forgot? No? I'll keep talking, so.
Hi, I'm Sarah Fatemi. My pronouns are that bitch. I'm kidding, there's she, her. I am a stand-up comedian, actress, writer, and producer. I've worked in post-production and mainly reality TV on networks like Bravo, including Shaws of Sunset, the last 2 seasons, yeah. And then I've performed at Comedy Store, Laugh Factory, Hollywood Improv, and yeah, I'm representing Iran as well. Yes, Zanzibar, thank you also.
So yeah, thank you guys again for joining. Thank you for the introductions. So, you know, like I said before, one of the things, one of the other reasons why I wanted to have this panel here and talk about all this is, me personally, when it comes to the term representation matters, which I believe in 100%, I do feel like that the MENA communities have often been left out of that conversation in terms of representation in the arts and progress that's being made. And a lot of us get involved in our respective art forms and what we're into at very young ages. We're influenced by a lot of different art forms and also our families as well. I know for me personally, I discovered like I wanted to act, write and direct at a young age, mostly from like watching, you know, Disney movies and being influenced by my idol, Mr. Steven Spielberg. And culture wasn't really on my mind back then as a kid, but I started to become more wary of it, you know, as I grew up and realizing, okay, yeah, maybe I should incorporate more of, you know, like where I come from, like where my family comes from, into my work. And I started working on that more, especially, you know, now as an adult. And that was, and that's when I was young, yeah, that's when I realized I wanted to act, write, and direct. And so my question to you guys is, what was it that first sparked your interest or interests in what you currently do? What was it that inspired you? Was it a person? Was it a movie? Was it a show? Was it a book?
Sure, I guess I'll go first and I can popcorn it over to somebody else if they want to. So, being in animation, it sounds like a much more glamorous job than it actually is. It is a job just like any other. There are some great days and there are some not so great days. But I knew that when I was younger, I wanted to be part of something bigger like that. I think we all know the animated movie The Little Mermaid. And to me, there was something about the way her character was acted on screen that felt so much more than just drawings. Like there was something really to this character and this fleshed out being on a screen, and I wanted to be a part of that. No pun intended, but I wanted to be a part of that world. And and thankfully, after a lot of really hard work, I was able to. I would say probably also I wasn't as necessarily in tune with culture as a representation until probably Aladdin came out, and I was like, oh, she kind of looks like me, but I don't really understand. And being the daughter of an immigrant, there's a lot of complications that come with that. There's a lot of nuances. Nothing is ever really black and white. And so for me and my family, I still wanted to, I still found inspiration in my culture and my heritage even after and before seeing that movie, but it felt like it was a more complex, nuanced thing than it was for so many other people, and I felt very alone for most of my life. I still kind of do sometimes. And what was the rest of the question? I'm sorry, I have ADHD brain.
What else inspired you to get into what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I mean, just being able to escape in the worlds that I could create on a page, and thankfully I don't have to do that as much now. I cosplay for that, but. yeah, I love being able to create a world or a character and be able to share that with people. Who wants to go next?
I'll go next.
All right, do it.
So, where I grew up in the US, I was the diverse person in every room. And coming here, I was like 5 years old. So I was just old enough to kind of get a grasp of my language, which is Arabic, and then lose it because I was learning to speak English. But the one thing that I had that always connected me to home was, you know, the soap operas, the television programs, the Egyptian movies. And it's the one thing, I think, in a family where everyone is trying to figure out who they are and where they stand in a new place, in a new community where nobody wants you around. And that's how it was where we lived. But it was the one thing that, like, it brought us all together at the end of the day. Like, if there was a good movie on, you know, my mom and dad would be like, oh, come watch this. And that was our connection to home. And for me, there is, I mean, just at this table in MENA cultures in general, this great tradition of storytelling. I think it's such a part of who we are that I had to be a storyteller. And yeah, so then I saw Edward Scissorhands when I was a kid, and I was like, I want to do that. I want to make movies. But yeah.
Yeah, I identify a lot with what you're both saying, especially that feeling of being alone, you know, growing up, especially mixed. So I'm Persian on my dad's side, and mom's white. And we didn't grow up with my mom's family at all, so she was like the one white person around. And I feel like it wasn't till after 9/11 that it really felt like, ooh, we're like different than everybody else. And I think also being queer and like being trans, I've gone through like many different letters of the alphabet mafia before landing on the T. But that feeling of loneliness and isolation, like you're the only person. And like I personally don't want another trans kid to ever feel that way. So that's why I write and I create and I produce, is because I want to get that out there. And I think it's so interesting with culture. Like for me, like wanting to do movies, it's like Bruce Lee, for sure. Like I have a martial arts background. I couldn't even, like ADHD child, couldn't even get through a movie wanting to like act out and pretend I was fighting people. And I think too, as like, you know, time's gone on, I realized that, you know, I always wanted to act, but then I was like, no one's telling our stories, whether it's Middle Eastern stories or queer stories, like we have to be the people to tell it. Because when they do get told by, like, not us, it doesn't usually go super well. And yeah, and it definitely, I have a feeling Aladdin's gonna be a common theme for all of us. Yeah, it's definitely one of my top 3 Disney movies. And it's funny, I think having that helped me feel not as like weird and alone, because like everyone knows Aladdin and loved Aladdin. And like, you know, until 9/11 happened, we weren't these like terrifying people. So.
Why do I draw? Like anyone, it was to draw my favorite characters and my fictional crushes, like Kakashi from Naruto. But truly, I've always really liked storytelling. I've always really wanted to tell stories. But it wasn't until much later that it came to me as a realization that I could tell stories that incorporate my culture. A lot of the things at first, whether it be drawing or storytelling, it was a lot of retelling things that I already knew or that I was already familiar with. And then eventually, I think we all want to see ourselves a little bit. I think anyone can relate to any character or any story, so it's not a question of that, but sometimes you want to relate a little bit deeper to the character, and so that's why I set out to do, you know, my stories, my webcomics, featuring things that are close to me and that remind me of my own cultures. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
It's a Belgian tradition. For me, I also was the one person of color. I'm from Ohio, unfortunately, but yeah. I really liked Shirley Temple movies growing up. I was like into all the old stuff, like the Beatles movies, and you know, I never saw myself as a person of color until I got to college, and I saw all these different like diversity groups and like Persian Student Association and Muslim Student Association, you know. And I guess like my first inspiration of like, as far as like someone who kind of looks like me was maybe Mindy Kaling, even though it's totally not even the same, like we're not even borders, you know? But I saw that and I was like, huh, so people who do look like us can, like, but like actually like us. Like I thought I looked like Shirley Temple all these years with my curly hair. So, and storytelling's been great. Comedy is a way that I've always been able to calm myself when I'm in a scary situation. I can always make a joke and, you know, just even if I'm talking to myself, and that's just, I feel like it's a true pain reliever, sorry. Yeah.
Everyone's got really nice, insightful answers. I'm the last one, unfortunately.
Pressure's on.
Yeah, right. Mine was really more of a compulsion than anything. I always drew from the time I was little. I didn't really think about it. It was the only thing I knew how to do. And as far as parents being supportive, my parents were like, what the hell else is he gonna do? So they just sort of allowed me to continue doing it because there was no hope for anything. And then, of course, you know, shout out to 9/11. Yeah, thanks. That's a lot of inspiration. But it's true. So I was in school. I remember you're just like another fucking terrorist story about like, or like another person who's like, I'm Muslim trying to escape this. Like, always the victim narrative, and you're just sick of it. You're like, can you just see a dude or a lady who's just doing their thing, and this happens to be part of their identity, but it's not like the central focus of it. Even now, I feel like that's kind of a thing that gets, you know, it's almost overcompensating where it becomes a thing where you're like, look how diverse it is. And you're like, dude, it's fine, we all eat pizza. Like, it's not totally crazy. So that was definitely like a big inspiration as far as, that sounds weird to say 9/11 inspired, but you know, not in that way.
It was a turning point.
It was a turning point, yeah. But, and then as far as influences, you know, comedy, same thing with me. I remember Chris Rock when I was young, because he was the first person I remember talking about like a non-white experience and very much like relating to his comedy in those first few stand-ups that he did. And I think it sort of grew from there.
Yeah, so that's the thing. It's like we've had plenty of like different experiences and different things that have influenced us with our cultures and like what kind of art we've consumed and what have we been surrounded by in terms of like what has influenced us and where we go to for our careers. And I know like with me personally, yeah, obviously I watched Aladdin like everybody else, and then I didn't really start becoming more aware of cultural things until, you know, unfortunately, you know, 9/11, when I was like, wait, but we're not the bad guys, are we? No, but basically, I started, that's when after that, I started noticing whenever like a Middle Eastern character showed up in a movie, they just weren't portrayed very positively, and I was just like, when are we gonna get some positive representation? When are we gonna get some positive portrayals? And it's slowly starting to happen over the last few years. We've noticed shows like Rami, which is on Hulu, which just had its third season, and Mo, which is on Netflix, just its first season just came out this year. And those are, you know, some examples. One thing that I was really proud of seeing was seeing Rami Malek win Best Actor at the Oscars a few years ago. That was a very good thing. And that's when I was like, okay, so it's slowly starting to happen. Like, this is happening, and I was just like, I want to be part of that still. Like, I want to be part of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, one thing that I've been trying to do with, like, whenever I'm writing, you know, a new story, new script or whatever, is like I'm trying to have more of my protagonists be, you know, Middle Eastern. Even if the story is not about their culture, even if the story has nothing to do like with representation in general, I still feel like it is like so important to have like them being there, like at the center of that story, to show that we can tell all different kinds of stories, culturally relevant or not, but still have a character in there. And so my next question for you guys is, what are some things that you have done or would like to do to contribute and raise awareness for more representation? And not just, you know, on screen, not just, you know, characters that you draw or characters that you write, but also behind the scenes.
I I have something to say, but I'll pass it on to somebody else for now because I don't like going down long.
I'll go.
Yeah, please do.
So I finally, I mean, just recently, I was saying this earlier, I've just kind of moved up into a position where I'm able to hire people. And I do put an emphasis on like trying to find people who don't really get a chance to get into the industry because of how difficult it has been for me, and I'm sure everyone else at this table has had a hard time too, because we're so rare. And coming in, there's already a story told about you, and I think that's the worst thing, that you don't get to say, this is who I am, that's not real. Like, we're already fighting. Every day we go out into the world, we're already fighting a narrative about ourselves. And I think the fastest way to kill that narrative or to change that narrative and have people say like, oh, or, you know, it's to meet other people. It's to meet Middle Eastern people or people from North Africa. And now that I'm in a hiring position, I'm like, yeah, like you have a cousin who wants to work in film, give me their phone number. I hire an entry-level position, PAing, and I will take time out of my day to teach people. I've stood in parking lots for hours just being like, this is what you need to do, and this is the reality of the job, because it's not easy. And it's a fight. And it's like, if I can open that door, I'm going to.
For me it's interesting because I feel like my acting and writing experience are really intertwined. I think it was really well said. We're storytellers. I was always told I can't play Middle Eastern. Like I don't look Middle Eastern enough. I wasn't in the class, but one of my acting teachers during a branding exercise used me as an example of somebody, just because you're a certain ethnicity doesn't mean you can play it. And my Egyptian friend told me about that. And so I got in this mindset of even when I was writing content, I can't write Middle Eastern. I can't write a mixed Middle Eastern. I can't write about my culture. And I don't know what flipped. I don't know why I was just like, fuck that, I'm not letting a white person tell me I can't write about being Middle Eastern. Like, what the hell is that? Because also it's a domino effect, right? Because if I cast myself and then I have family, if I can only play European descent, I can't cast anybody else. I can't cast diversity, and I don't think people think of that. And funnily enough, a series I think that did that really well was the Disney Channel movie series, The Descendants. If you remember that one. They have a couple like lead actors in it who are mixed black, and I think to the white eye might pass as white, but they cast their family members as black. And I feel like it's such a Hollywood thing to be like, oh well, they look white, so we can only cast white people. And like I have a friend, my best friend is Persian, is also writing this fantasy series, and by keeping, like she's playing MENA because I'm her best friend, but
it's a real friend.
Yeah, but by staying true to me being Persian. The brother character can be MENA, and also it's just like, not to sound like an Aladdin fanboy, but one of the things I loved about the live action Aladdin, besides the fact I feel like it really found the joy of our culture and really highlighted it, is that you had Middle Easterns of all shades, because we do come in a variety. It's very weird, we talked about this, that we're all lumped into one category because we're all so different.
Yeah.
And so I think it's that thing where like, just finally just owning my own culture and just putting that in as a way I feel like I'm fighting for diversity.
Can I add something? I just want to, like the live action Aladdin, if you could see how much work went in behind the scenes from MENA people to make sure that they were represented properly. I mean, you guys should Google it and look into it. There's so many different bureaus and just normal people who kicked up a fuss when they were casting this movie this time. And thankfully Disney was like, we're listening. And I think that's the triumph of that movie, is like, okay, all right, like we'll let you tell your story this time.
Yeah, and I agree. I feel like it's very much I don't know if it's trickle down or trickle up, but we need the representation behind the scenes in order to have not just representation, but good representation, because I won't go into this question, but is representation worth it if it's bad representation?
Yeah.
Fun fact, I was an extra in Argo, so I'm doing my part.
There you go, they say true to cast.
That's it, mic drop.
So what am I hoping to do for representation? I think representation is a bit of a double-edged sword for people of color, in the sense that representing your whole community is an impossible task for just one person, right? You represent yourself first and foremost, and then everything else that informs you, your culture, that's still a very unique experience. And I find that sometimes representation, there's this very impossible expectation to meet when it comes to people of color, people of different cultures, when it comes to our work and representative and what does it mean for something to be good representation or bad representation. So representation is tricky for me in that way, but also at the same time, we have to sort of own up to this challenge if we want to retake our narratives into our own hands, right? So that's why it's important that we do, strive to that we do strive to tell our own stories, but also not get bogged down into the impossible task of trying to represent everyone, because at the end of the day, that's just not something that's realistic or healthy. I think the idea is to open the door to many people, so that way there's many different people telling many different stories, and everyone can sort of find themselves and not just have like your one quota, like this one Algerian story, and that's all you're gonna get, and you better be happy with it. You got the one, and I think there's still a lot of work to do for that. That's more like my opening statement. Me personally, I hope I can keep creating stories that bring joy, that make people happy, that empower them in ways, and to create characters that are relatable for everyone, even if they're not North African, and that people can celebrate. Yeah.
Going off of what she said, I think there is a danger in a single narrative as far as representation goes. I think we're really thankful that the industry, I do feel, has started to listen, but there still feels like we sometimes fall into the trap of tokenization. So for example, as a comedian, I do hear sometimes, oh, well, we already have an Iranian comic or an Iranian female comic on the lineup. And it's like, but we don't all talk about the same thing. Like, I mean, there's so much, there's so much nuance in all of our backgrounds. Like, I remember actually I used to get some flack for working on Shahs of Sunset, but it's like, I really saw that show as a good thing because there were 6 cast members, not just one. Some were Muslim, some were Jewish, some go to Iran, some can't, and those are just very surface level differences. But I thought it was so cool to see an all Persian cast where they all kind of come from somewhat different backgrounds. As far as what I'm doing, I mean, I'm not at the level yet in production to like hire other people, and I think that's so cool that there are people who are doing that. I'm focusing on-screen and mainly Middle Eastern women. For example, I created a pilot called Saffron and Rose a few years ago, kind of like the Iranian Broad City, and it was about 2 Iranian American girls who start a secret podcast about sex. One's a virgin, one's very sexually liberated, and it's pretty cool. You should watch it. No, no, but I think definitely as far as like Middle Eastern women in mainstream, we have not hit that mark yet. Because Mo Amer and Rami are amazing shows, but they're men. So it's kind of like what she said. Kind of focus on a specific cause. Like, is it Middle Eastern women? Is it like, what sect of the community are you striving for? And that way I think you can make a little more progress and open the doors to many people.
I want to say, just to piggyback off of that, your individual story is the most valuable thing you have. Trying to tell someone else's story, it's not going to be genuine. And people aren't stupid. I think for a long time, these industries, entertainment industries, have kind of been like, I don't know. But no, people, we understand. We know the nuances of being human, so we can tell when someone's lying to us. And that's why I think, like, just in this room alone, it's a gold mine. Like, find other people who have similar interests, find other people who have shared experiences, regardless of background, and create stuff with them. The more genuine it is, the more awards it's going to win, and the more doors it opens.
I'll let you go, and then I'll...
I just have one more thing to add to it, which is, it sounds weird, but like the right to not have any representation, meaning like if you want to write a story that don't feel the pressure to have a Middle Eastern person in it, or I'm sorry, MENA in general. I'm just thinking about myself like a real Iranian. But that was something that I feel like I struggled to get through, where I was, especially when I was in grad school, people were like, they reinforce this. They're like, oh, you're Iranian, you're Middle Eastern, you should tell these stories, you tell these stories. And you're like, I kind of just want to write a dumb cartoon about weird snowmen and robots that doesn't necessarily incorporate all those things into it. And that was like a process for me to like be okay with that and realize that like that experience will still kind of shine through, even though it's not literal. But I think all of it is what we want. All of it. We want everything.
Yeah.
Do you want everything? I want more. I'm just gonna keep going on with the Little Mermaid references. I want to echo what everyone else shared. There were all some really, deeply insightful thoughts where we all have intertwining cultural exchanges that have happened over centuries and millennia, but we're not the same. And I think it's funny that you guys talk about the most recent live action Aladdin in such a positive light, because to me, I was still like, this is still a bit of a cultural soup. Like, it's not quite there enough for me yet. But like, I respect that opinion, and they're allowed to have a different opinion than me, that's fine. For me,
Can I piggyback off?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I also sort of share more of Kristina's view on it, in the sense that it was definitely an improvement from the 1992 cartoon where we chop off your head if they don't like your face, like that lyric.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think we should all sort of ask ourselves when it comes to representation, why are European stories or Eurocentric stories allowed to have this nuance in people's collective imaginary? People can make the difference between France and Italy and Spain, and even though they're geographically they're like in a very small space, but when it comes to Middle East or North Africans, it's all this like very vague sort of like what's going on, and then that obviously stems from Orientalism, and that has its roots in like very oppressive historical settings and tools. And so I would love if we would be able to all be afforded the same nuance when it comes to like, North Africa, Algeria is very, very different from Iran, and it's very, very different from Egypt, and that territory is huge, and it has a lot of diversity, and I do feel that we're often all lumped together when we do have a lot of
It's all just sand, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's all just sand and dudes.
I don't like sand.
I love being asked about camels. So we don't have camels.
Yeah, and so
You don't ride one to work?
Oh yeah.
you forgot your turban.
I know I shouldn't have shaved. What am I doing?
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I think I was just going on about how a lot of the live action sort of, it was there. There were some differences, but it was, to me, it was still sort of an idea of putting things together. But anyway,
yeah, absolutely. So I'll share about my experience too in regards to this, but I also want to say as like a Coptic Egyptian, it's different from like other Egyptian heritages. Like we are all very similar and very intertwined again, because that is the natural aspect of cultural exchange. Like you're in a similar place, but it's not completely melded together. There are still pockets of people that tend to stick together. So when people say that Egyptians are white,
Oh my God.
I say, really? Is that how colonization works? Look at where Egypt is.
Yeah, the guys who made it.
Yeah.
Were white.
Right.
My
And
favorite line is I'm not treated like a white person.
You're right.
So
Yeah.
that's why it's not.
Well, see, and here's the thing too, like when Napoleon and the Brits came in, and other people came in, there was a semblance of, from my historical understanding, this might just be me, it could be different from somebody else's, but from my understanding is, at least in my family, it was assimilate or die. And so my family chose to assimilate, especially for my father, who immigrated here from Egypt. He went through a bunch of crazy things, like the Suez Canal crisis, the Brotherhood uprising in the 70s, several other things that happened that led him to come here and say, no, I might be Egyptian, but I'm going to be American now, and I will not teach my children our culture, I will not teach our language. And that hurt, because it felt not only erasing himself, but ignoring everything that he had been through to come here, and I realized that was a way of surviving. But what's interesting is that's a lot of people's stories, even recently, especially with different things happening.
Can I add to that? Because I'm Egyptian as well.
Yeah.
And it's funny because my parents were like, no, we just live here. we're not like these people. Like, we are this way.
It's
It's
very
the opposite.
different. Yeah.
But we're from the same place.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah.
Yeah, and like that's so important to distinguish too. So even in that, I felt erased from wanting to know my own culture. I felt erased from being able to tell that story. And so when people said to me like, oh no, Egyptians are white, I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, well, Cleopatra was Greek. I'm like, no, that's based on old. Anyway, I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of that. But the thing is that I'm going to say something potentially controversial here. Ancient Egyptians did not magically disappear. They're still here. You know, to some varying degrees, like things do happen, but it's very much like Indigenous Americans. They also just didn't disappear. Like that doesn't happen. And so for me to feel like I'm locked out of telling my own culture story feels terrible. Only until this year have I been asked, I want to have your story as part of this animated project. I would love to have you on this project because our characters are going to Egypt and it means something to the production and the team that we have someone on the team who knows about this, who can handle it with grace and nuance like no one else can. And I'm like, do you know how big of a deal this is? Like nobody ever asks that, especially for MENA folks. So it means a lot and it's an honor. So please, more of that. That would be great.
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, side note, I auditioned for the Aladdin movie and I did not get in.
It's okay.
You're always Aladdin to me.
Yeah, to kind of go off like what everybody was saying, you know, about like not erasing, you know, our history and our culture, and also, you know, representation, you know, not tokenism. Those are all definitely very important things that we're still like working, you know, for like improving, to improve upon, because, you know, because a lot of other like people of color are still working on those same issues in arts and media today, and so it's definitely very important that we remind people of those who like may not be familiar with our culture. We write and create like kind of stories from our perspectives, like MENA perspectives as well. I'm gonna ask one question and then I know some people here submitted questions, thank you. So, is there anything that you guys have done in your work that involved incorporating something from your culture that you were like very proud of, that you've done already? Like, so for example, for me, I was on a web show a few years ago called Mr. Student Body President. It's on YouTube right now, but it used to be on Go90, which is Verizon's streaming service that shut down years ago. But I was on this series, I went from extra to cast member on the show, and they named my character Paul. They didn't create a new name for me, they just kind of upgraded me. But I was like, my character doesn't have a last name, and I asked the creators of the show, can my character be Middle Eastern MENA? Can he have a, oh thank you, can he have a last name? And so I gave them a list of names like, to see what they wanted to use, and they landed on the name Fakuri. And my character's name was Paul Fakuri on the show, and that made me feel very proud, like wow, these guys, these two white creators actually listened to me, and I feel like very happy about that, and I hope other people can experience that kind of joy that like they were listened to and feel like, okay, yeah, we can be represented in this form. So was there anything, any moment in your guys' careers that you felt anything like that, or anything that you would like, you would like to have happen?
Only the story that I just shared. That's it.
Well, something that I felt very proud of as an Amazigh person. So for people that don't know, Amazigh are the indigenous group of North Africa. So I'm Amazigh, I'm Kaveh also. I speak the language, I learn the language, and it was always very important in sort of my core identity. So something that made me very happy was when I showed my grandma the webtoon, and that the opening of the webtoon is a traditional sort of oral opening, a way that we all start stories. So that was very fun for me to see that my family members were really happy because in terms of the Amazigh, we're not very well known, and I was very happy and proud to be able to, share my webtoon and have other people learn about my culture in a fun way. All my work is very rooted in my own culture and our stories and our folklore, and it always makes me happy that people feel seen and are happy to feel seen.
I mean, just as I mentioned before, my focus is kind of creating like pilots and content that specifically deal with Middle Eastern women and whether she's hijab clad or whether she's, you know, wearing those dental floss on her, you know? We can do that too, like, but yeah, no, I mean, just and it was actually so well received by a lot of people online, and there were a lot of Iranian Americans specifically who were like, this is the show that I needed growing up, and you know, we were hoping to take it further. Unfortunately, budget didn't allow, but you know, it really ignited a spark in me, like, we need stuff like this. We can't sit around and wait for the industry to come to us. We need to create our own path. And that's going to open a lot of other doors. And as far as stand-up goes, there is a diversity movement. And there are a lot of female Middle Eastern stand-up comedians who I actually help out a lot with this show called Minority Reports, which it focuses more on specifically just female brown comics, whether it's, you know, Desi women, Arab women, Persian women. And yeah, I mean, and also connecting each other too, because the community, it's large, and you know, we need to have each other to rely on. Like, for example, just all these people sitting here who are of my background. There's no feeling of competition, there's no animosity. I mean, we're all working together for one kind of common cause, and that's just so cool. So.
Bold of you to assume I'm proud of anything that I've actually done. I guess the first example that comes to mind was I got to illustrate a book. It was a children's book series about Nowruz, which is the Persian New Year. I weirdly found that like a very, like, I don't know, soulful kind of like fulfilling experience, because the stories specifically, the pitch that was given to me about the books was like, when you go to the store and you see every Christmas book, it's just, you know, Johnny's getting presents under the Christmas tree. It's not like someone's sitting them down and screaming at them about like their Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. They get to sort of have this non-religious aspect to it, or non-super cultural. They get to just have fun. Whereas like every, I don't know about you guys, but every Nowruz thing that we got growing up was like you were getting lectured all the time, which is what
Isn't that just having Persian?
Yeah, right. So it was a really fun project to be like, oh yeah, and it allowed me to sort of reflect back on all the fun experiences I had as a kid and things that I really loved about Nowruz that wasn't, I mean, obviously Nowruz isn't really like religious, but it was like, it was this thing that made me feel really cool separately from everybody else growing up in a way that didn't make me feel bad when it normally did, you know?
Right, yeah.
So that project was a lot of fun, and we ended up doing 3 books. So we did one for Nowruz, we did one for Red Wednesday for Charsham Asuni, and one for Sreejith Nair, which is Nature Day, sort of what we translated to. And we put them in this like little, this little case, covering. So we sell them as like a trilogy of books, and people ate that shit up. They loved it. They were so excited for that exact reason. So it was really cool to be like, we made this thing with this exact specific emotional reason for it, and on the other end of it, people responded in the exact same way, and they loved it for that. And it was really, really fun to do, and you know. I kind of want to do it as an animated series one time. We'll see.
That's amazing. For me, I have a web series that I did. It's in post-production right now. So as we know in the industry, who knows when that, how that'll go. But I just wrote in one really simple moment of my character who is originally from Texas, and it follows like 3 LGBT roommates. I was the non-binary lesbian in it, so it was, before I transitioned. But my character's from Texas, and just makes a comment of like, oh, like LA has really great Persian food, and then the 2 roommates being like, oh, you like Persian food? I'm like, yeah, and they're like, oh, and I'm like, my last name is Modares, and they're like, what? And I'm like, what? Is that like, like having that moment of being like, we literally come in all shades, like especially like Iran, it's just like you can be blonde, blue-eyed to black, like literally. It's just like we're so diverse as like one country, let alone like lumping all of MENA, and like so being a bartender server. My full name is Yasmin, and so unfortunately you have to say your name to people a lot. And so the number of times I've had the conversation of like, oh, what's your name? Yasmin. Oh, that's such a pretty name. What is it? It's Persian. Oh my God, you don't look Persian. Has happened so much, and because I'm working, I can't say what I want to say, which is like, oh, I don't look like a terrorist. Even though I feel like looking like a white man, I think I look more like one now, at least in America. So it was just kind of this moment of getting to be like, for my own self-vindication as well, of being like, what are you trying to say? Because it happens so much.
I'll add something to that. I don't think a lot of people know that assistant directors, we do all the crowd work on movies and TV. And so I was actually working as a background actor at the time. I had to. It was great. It was great fun. But the only call I got was like Syrian Village in the 90s. And I show up and it's just like a dirt road with some rickety like carts. And I'm like, you know, Syria does not look like this. And like I just went up to the 80s and I was like, guys, this is not right. And they were like, you know, at first they're kind of like, hey, who are you? And I'm like, no, I'm one of you and I'm telling you this is not right. And they were like, okay. And they then had to look in my face and make all their choices that day knowing that someone who understood the culture was watching them. And so they were a lot more careful than they had been the first half of the day. But when I went back and like watched the episode, what was like super wide shots of just these like really impoverished roads with sand everywhere became these super tight shots where you couldn't really see the background. And I think they were like, okay. Like,
did they put a yellow filter?
Yeah.
Make a dust.
They didn't actually. I was like, no, we're not gonna do this. Yeah. But yeah, that was my little thing. Yeah. Questions?
Anybody else?
Huh?
We've got time for like maybe a couple questions, guys. Thank you so much. If we don't get to all of these, like, you can feel free to like DM me or like ask any of us after the panel if you want. So we got some questions here. One of the questions that we were asked was this one here. So, like, how, one of the questions was, and guys, because we've got less than 10 minutes left, let's try to do like maybe 20-second answers for these.
Sweet.
So one of the questions was, oh, jeez. How have you dealt with being stereotyped in your jobs or in the industry, and what is a good way of dealing with it?
Okay. Stereotyped in my industry is either thinking that I'm a terrorist or I'm dangerous or exotic, and I'm neither of those things. I am a human and I have experiences, and everybody's experiences are different. So my advice for dealing with it is like just sharing my story as best I can between my coworkers, getting to know people. In terms of industry-related stuff, I am also frustrated with the idea of the perfect daughter thing. I'm definitely not a perfect daughter. In fact, I'm estranged from my family on purpose. They did not support me necessarily being in animation, so that is a journey I had to take on my own. And a family to help, found family to help support me through that, but just know that if you're going through the same thing, you're not alone.
For me, it's just, when you figure out who you are, hold on to that. Because the world's gonna try and tell you so many different things about yourself, and you have to be ready to be like, nah, that's not true. And I'm behind the camera. And a lot of the times, people are kind of like, oh, like, yeah, oh, Egypt, like, you know, you ride camels and live in pyramids and stuff like that. And it's an extreme example. But when I step onto set, it's me, it's Esraa. I'm a member of one of the oldest civilizations to have existed. And I have thousands of years of lineage behind me. Like, no one is going to tell me who I am. Like, I've won that fight and I know who I am. And so when I have these like white male directors who think the world is theirs and they're gonna step all over me, or any crew member, it's like, no, that's not going to happen. And they find, like, I find very quickly people, when you push back and just take up your space, are like, okay, it's not worth it. Like, she's not just gonna roll over.
Yeah, I would say very similar, like from an on-camera perspective as well. But I would also say you don't always have to explain yourself. Like, I won't go into the details of the story with time, but I was telling them about how like a white lady was like, I was talking to her about like Iran being Asian. She was like, oh yeah, you're Oriental. And I was like, so you know what I did? I walked away. I was like, I have to go check on something because I was an actor. I was like, I'm not dealing with this. So, you know, you don't have to owe anyone an explanation if you don't have capacity. They have Google. There are influencers who have voices. Like, they can figure it out. You don't have to give them the time of day if you don't want to.
see Yas as a much better man than I am, because if someone had told me I was an Oriental, I don't know what would have happened. So when it comes to being stereotyped in, workplace or online or like through comments, I think one thing is you have to pick your battles, right? Sometimes you want to educate, sometimes you have the capacity to correct people and say, well, this is not how it is, and try to correct, but it's also okay to step away from these things, but you just have to stand on your own 2 feet and, remember that, it's kind of like Esraa was saying, that you are you and no one can tell you who you are and your identity. But some fights are worth fighting, some others just, you can just walk away and you don't have to educate the whole entire world, and actually it's not your job to.
I can say that you should not be afraid to suck all the air out of the room if necessary, and I've had to do that before. And we're in a better position now where if anyone fucks with you, you can send a couple of emails and there will be a paper trail. So do not be afraid of that, as uncomfortable as it is, despite if you're raised MENA like us, I'm sure you've been trained to be as polite and deferential as possible, which really comes in conflict with people being assholes, and if you're in a position of power, they still will call you a member of fucking ISIS, and you have to stand up to it and be like, that's not okay. It doesn't matter that I'm in this position. That's completely inappropriate. So do that, and everyone will hate you maybe, but that's fine.
I mean, mine's a little more specific. I had one of my representation, like one of my managers tell me, I was like, okay, so I'm not really keen on playing terrorist roles, and they're like, of course not. You would play the terrorist's daughter.
Oh my God. Wow.
So, it's okay. No, that's kind of what made me lean into comedy, because there's not a lot of like terrorism roles in comedic shows. This is just kind of going, we are going down. It's fine. Everything is fine. Create your own stuff. This is as far as performers go. Use social media to your advantage. Use the fact that you can write and tell your own stories to your advantage. You don't have to play into their stereotypes. You don't have to wait for the industry to come to you. You create your own narrative, tell your own story, and you take it to them. And the farther we push, the more we can break that glass ceiling, or whatever, marble ceiling.
Alright. Sorry, we try to keep it short, but you put a mic in front of a bunch of MENA people. It's not, we're not even talking.
Guys, unfortunately, we do have to wrap up here, but we got a bunch of great questions here. If you want to come up to us and ask us after, you can do that.
We're going to real shout out real quick. I'm over in Artist Alley in D07. Please come check out my booth.
Where again?
Artist Alley D07.
Yeah.
If you get a chance, please come look at some of my books. I love it.
Do you guys have anything you want to shout out? Any events coming up? Any projects you're working on? Any socials before we wrap out here?
You guys can follow me on Instagram at Sarah, S-A-R-A-H, Fatemi, F-A-T-E-M-I, official. There will be a link in my bio. On Monday night, we are doing a fundraiser for the Iran Human Rights Center, based in Washington, D.C. at the Hollywood Improv. It's a stand-up comedy show. All ticket sales go to that Human Rights Center. It's not going into Iran. Please do not send money to Iran. It is going to a Human Rights Center, which is an online archive, basically, of all of the Iranian government's crimes against humanity, so that when they are ousted, they will be held accountable.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you guys so much for coming to MENA Representation in Arts and Entertainment. Another big round of applause for our panelists here, and also a big round of applause to Sreejith over here for recording the panel. Thank you guys so much, it means a lot. Please follow us on social media. I'm at Hollywood Forever. Thank you for coming, and have a great rest of the day here at LA Comic Con.
Thank you so much.
Yes.